The universe watched in stunned silence as the massive dragon flew through the dimensional portal with the tiny human infant clutched gently in its claws, disappearing from Earth forever. No one could have predicted that 20 years later, this unlikely pair would return to save humanity from extinction. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I always love chatting with you, and it really helps support the channel. Also, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Smoke hung thick in the air over what remained of New Sacramento, the once thriving colony now reduced to smoldering ruins. The attack had come without warning. The Vraxian fleet descending from orbit with overwhelming force, their energy weapons carving destruction across the settlement. Among the rubble, beneath a collapsed transit station, a small miracle persisted. A 6-month-old baby boy somehow still alive, protected by the reinforced crib his parents had placed him in before the attack, claimed their lives. 5 kilometers above, soaring through the ash-filled clouds, Cavarax surveyed the devastation with ancient eyes. His crystalline scales shimmered between deep blue and purple as he banked through a thermal updraft, massive wings spanning nearly 30 meters. Unlike the biological dragons of human mythology, Cavarax was something far more complex. A biosynthetic being created by the long-vanished Elderly civilization as a guardian and keeper of knowledge. For 3,000 years, he had observed the rise and fall of civilizations across 17 star systems, always watching, always learning, but rarely interfering. Cavarax had come to investigate the Vraxian attack, not out of compassion for the human colonists, but from scientific curiosity. The Vraxians were not known for such aggressive expansion. Something had changed in the galactic balance, and as one of the last Elderly creations, Cavarax felt compelled to understand why. He had not expected to find survivors. The dragon's enhanced senses detected the faint biological signature first, a tiny heartbeat among the ruins, remarkably strong despite the surrounding devastation. Banking sharply, Cavarax descended toward the collapsed transit station, his massive form casting shadows across the rubble. Landing with surprising grace for a creature of his size, he began carefully moving debris with his claws. The baby had been crying, but fell silent at the sight of the massive dragon. Instead of fear, the infant's eyes widened with fascination at the shimmering scales and glowing eyes. Cavarax tilted his massive head, equally intrigued by the tiny being's reaction. "Curious," the dragon rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "You show no fear." The baby gurgled in response, tiny hands reaching toward the dragon's luminescent snout. Cavarax had studied humans for centuries, but had never interacted with them directly. This infant, barely 6 months old according to the dragon's biological scans, represented something unexpected, a clean slate, untainted by preconceptions or fear. What happened next defied all logical protocols in Cavarax's ancient programming. The dragon made a decision that would alter the fate of multiple civilizations. He would save this child, not merely by delivering it to other humans, but by taking it with him into the depths of space, across dimensional boundaries where no human had ever ventured. The Vraxians will return to finish what they started. Cavarax rumbled, gently lifting the baby with a precision that belied his enormous size. "And you, little one, represents something I have not encountered in 800 years, a genuine surprise." The decision made, Cavarax spread his massive wings, the crystalline membranes catching the light of the colony's setting sun. With the baby secured safely against his chest in a field of protective energy, the dragon launched skyward, quickly ascending beyond the atmosphere. In orbit, he paused, his ancient eyes taking in the fleet of Vraxian warships still hovering over the devastated colony. "They have changed," Cavarax observed. "There is something different about their energy signatures." The infant, seemingly untroubled by the rapid ascent or the vacuum of space, protected as he was by the dragon's energy field, simply yawned. Cavarax felt an unfamiliar sensation ripple through his synthetic consciousness. The Elderly had programmed him to preserve knowledge, to observe and learn, but they had also given him something few artificial beings possessed, the capacity for genuine curiosity and, perhaps, even attachment. "I shall call you Orin," the dragon decided. After the Elderly word for unexpected variable, With a thought, Cavarax activated the dimensional drive embedded in his crystalline core. Space twisted around them, reality folding like origami in the hands of a master. A portal opened, a swirling vortex of energy that would transport them to Cavarax's sanctuary, a pocket dimension where time flowed differently and where the dragon had accumulated millennia of knowledge. The Vraxian flagship detected the dimensional disturbance, turning its sensors toward the dragon and the tiny human in his protection. Energy weapons charged, but too late. Dragon and child vanished through the portal, leaving only a ripple in space-time that quickly collapsed behind them. Admiral Zaret of the Vraxian Command Fleet hissed in frustration as the sensors reported the closure of the dimensional portal. What was that? He demanded of his science officer. Unknown, Admiral. The officer replied, mandibles clicking nervously. But sensors detected an elderly energy signature and a human life form. The Admiral's compound eyes narrowed. The elderly are extinct. They have been for millennia. Yes, Admiral, but their creations, some may have survived. Zaret turned to look at the devastated human colony below. Could this complicate the Prophet's plans? Impossible to determine, Admiral. The Admiral's exoskeleton shimmered with tension. Continue the cleansing operation. I will inform the Prophet of this anomaly. As the Vraxian fleet resumed its bombardment of the already devastated colony, ensuring no human structure remained standing, a single ship detached from the formation, accelerating into the depths of space. Aboard, Admiral Zaret prepared his report with growing unease. The Prophet had promised them that humanity would be easily conquered, primitive beings barely capable of interstellar travel, with no significant allies among the older races. The appearance of an elderly creation changed everything. If the ancient guardians were taking an interest in humanity, the Prophet's assurances suddenly seemed far less certain. In the sanctuary dimension, time flowed differently. For every year that passed in the normal universe, only a month passed in Cavarax's realm. The dragon had created this pocket of altered reality millennia ago as a place to store and study the knowledge he had gathered across the cosmos. The sanctuary itself defied conventional description, a series of floating islands amid an eternal twilight, each island housing different ecosystems and structures. At the center stood Cavarax's library, a massive crystalline spire that contained the accumulated wisdom of dozens of extinct civilizations. For the infant Orin, the sanctuary became home. Cavarax, drawing on his vast knowledge of multiple species, created an environment where the human child could thrive. Using molecular synthesizers, the dragon produced everything the growing child needed: food, clothing, toys, and educational materials. Today we shall learn about stellar cartography, Cavarax announced as 6-year-old Orin climbed eagerly onto the dragon's foreleg. In the normal universe, nearly 70 years had passed, but within the sanctuary, Orin had experienced only 7 years of life. The boy had grown into a curious, energetic child with an insatiable appetite for knowledge, a trait that pleased the ancient dragon enormously. Can we study the Vraxians today? Orin asked, his young face serious. You promised you'd tell me why they attacked my home. Cavarax rumbled thoughtfully. The Vraxians are a complex species, Orin. They were once peaceful traders, philosophers even. Their transformation into conquerors is relatively recent, occurring within the last 1,000 years. But why did they kill my parents? The boy persisted. The dragon had never hidden the truth from his human ward. From the earliest age, Orin had known he was adopted, that his biological parents had died protecting him, and that somewhere in the universe, other humans still existed. The Vraxians follow what they call the prophecy of ascension, Cavarax explained. They believe that by conquering and assimilating other species, particularly younger races like humanity, they will evolve into beings of pure energy, similar to what they believe the Elderly achieved. Did the Elderly really become energy beings? Cavarax's massive head swayed side to side, his equivalent of a negative response. No, the Elderly simply left this dimensional plane. They were flesh and blood, just as you are, just as the Vraxians are. But they understood things about the universe that other races are still discovering. Orin's small hand traced patterns on Cavarax's crystalline scales. Will I ever meet other humans? The question caused an unexpected ripple of concern through Cavarax's consciousness. The dragon had been monitoring the outside universe during his periodic excursions from the sanctuary. The news was not good. The Vraxians had launched a systematic campaign against human colonies, driving the species back to their home system. Earth itself remained protected, thanks to defensive technologies the humans had acquired through their alliance with the Tellurian Confederation, but human expansion had been halted completely. Perhaps someday, Cavarax replied carefully. But first, you must learn. Knowledge is the greatest weapon and the strongest shield. Orin nodded solemnly, accepting the dragon's wisdom as he always did. But that night, as the boy slept in his chamber within the crystalline spire, Cavarax found himself troubled. The dragon accessed the sanctuary's temporal viewport, a technology that allowed him to observe events in the normal universe without physically leaving the sanctuary. The images confirmed his fears. The Vraxian campaign against humanity had accelerated. Their forces now encircled the Sol system, methodically dismantling the defensive stations that protected Earth's orbital approaches. The Tellurian allies had withdrawn their support, facing pressures on their own borders from Vraxian-aligned powers. They are more determined than I anticipated, Cavarax murmured. But why this fixation on humanity specifically? The dragon accessed the sanctuary's vast database, correlating Vraxian activities across 2,000 years of history. A pattern emerged that troubled the ancient Guardian deeply. The Vraxians had systematically targeted species with specific genetic markers that the Eldery had once identified as indicating potential for rapid evolutionary development. They are eliminating competition, Cavarax realized, not for resources or territory, but for evolutionary advantage. The dragon's calculations indicated that humanity, if allowed to develop naturally, would achieve in mere thousands of years what had taken other species millions. The human capacity for adaptation, for technological and cultural innovation, represented a threat to Vraxian ambitions. They fear what humans might become, Cavarax concluded, and perhaps rightly so. The ancient Guardian made a decision then. He would continue Orin's education, but with a new purpose. The boy would need to understand not just the knowledge of ancient civilizations, but how to apply that knowledge. Because someday, perhaps sooner than the dragon had initially planned, Orin would need to return to his people. As the years passed in the sanctuary, Orin grew from a curious child into a thoughtful adolescent. By the sanctuary's time, he was 15 years old, equivalent to nearly 150 years in the outside universe. His education under Cavarax's guidance had been comprehensive beyond anything possible in human institutions. He had studied the sciences, philosophies, and histories of dozens of civilizations, including many that had vanished long before humanity achieved spaceflight. The key difference in the Eldery approach to dimensional physics, Cavarax was explaining, is their understanding that consciousness itself affects the quantum state. Orin nodded, making notes on his data tablet. So the observer doesn't just influence the observation. The observer's state of mind actually changes the fundamental properties of space-time. Precisely, the dragon confirmed, pleased with his student's quick understanding. This is why the Eldery were able to. A sudden alarm interrupted the lesson, resonating throughout the crystalline spire. Cavarax's form tensed, scales shifting from their usual blue to a deeper purple, a sign of concern that Orin had learned to recognize. What is it? The young man asked, already packing away his study materials. A dimensional breach, Cavarax replied, his voice grave. Something is attempting to force entry into the sanctuary. In all the years Orin had lived there, nothing had ever disturbed their solitude. The sanctuary existed outside normal space-time, accessible only to Cavarax himself. For something to breach those defenses was unprecedented. Is it the Vraxians? Orin asked, his voice tight. Unknown, but we must assume hostile intent. The dragon lowered his massive head. Climb on, Orin. We need to secure the core archives. Without hesitation, Orin scrambled onto the dragon's back, finding his usual position just behind the great creature's neck. Despite his growing size, he was tall for a human teenager. Orin still felt small atop the massive dragon. Cavarax launched into the twilight sky of the sanctuary, powerful wings carrying them swiftly toward the floating island that housed the most sensitive and dangerous knowledge the dragon had accumulated over millennia. The core archives contain technologies and scientific principles that could destabilize entire civilizations if misused. As they approached the archive island, Orin gasped. A swirling distortion had appeared in the space above the crystalline structure, a forced dimensional aperture unlike the smooth portals Cavarax created. They found a resonance key. The dragon rumbled, genuine alarm in his ancient voice. They are tracing the Eldery signature in my matrix. Who are they? Orin demanded. Before Cavarax could answer, the distortion expanded violently, tearing open a jagged portal. Through the breach came 3 Vraxian scout ships, their insectoid design unmistakable even to Orin, who had only seen them in historical records. The Vraxians, Cavarax confirmed grimly. After all this time, they've developed the technology to track dimensional signatures. The lead Vraxian ship immediately opened fire, energy beams lancing toward the dragon and his human rider. Cavarax banked sharply, his crystalline scales absorbing and dispersing the energy attack. Orin held on tightly, years of flying with the dragon giving him the balance and reflexes needed to stay mounted during the evasive maneuvers. They cannot be allowed to access the archives, Cavarax stated, turning to face the attackers. Hold tight, Orin. The dragon's chest began to glow with concentrated energy. Unlike the fire-breathing creatures of human mythology, Cavarax's offensive capabilities were far more sophisticated. A focused beam of highly energized particles that could disrupt matter at the molecular level. The blast struck the lead Vraxian ship, causing its shields to flare brilliantly before collapsing. The vessel spiraled toward one of the sanctuary's islands, trailing smoke and debris. The remaining 2 ships scattered, adopting a more cautious approach. They were not expecting resistance of this magnitude, Cavarax observed. But more will come. The breach is stable now. They've established a permanent access point. Can't you close it? Orin asked, ducking as energy fire passed overhead. Not while defending against their attacks. The sanctuary's security protocols are designed to be managed from the central nexus. Orin understood immediately. The library spire. We need to get back there. Cavarax banked again, accelerating away from the archive island. The remaining Vraxian ships pursued, but the dragon's speed in his home dimension was unmatched. They quickly outdistanced their pursuers, arriving at the central spire that had been Orin's home for most of his life. What will you do? Orin asked as they landed on the spire's uppermost platform. Initiate sanctuary collapse, Cavarax replied grimly. This dimension was never meant to be discovered or breached. If the Vraxians gain access to the knowledge stored here, countless civilizations will suffer. Orin felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Collapse? You mean destroy it? But this is our home. The dragon's ancient eyes fixed on his human ward. Home is not a place, Orin. It is where one belongs. You have always belonged among your own kind. I merely delayed your return. My return? You're sending me away? The teenager's voice cracked with emotion. The time has come sooner than I anticipated, Cavarax acknowledged. The Vraxians have not relented in their campaign against humanity. Your people stand on the brink of extinction, driven back to their home world, their colonies destroyed or occupied. The dragon moved to a crystalline console embedded in the platform, activating it with a touch of his claw. Holographic displays appeared, showing the state of the outside universe. Orin stared in horror at images of Earth surrounded by Vraxian warships, the once extensive human defense network reduced to a handful of orbital platforms. This is happening now, he asked. In relative time, yes. Remember that nearly 150 standard years have passed outside while you've grown here. This is the culmination of a long campaign. Orin struggled to process the information. His entire life had been spent in isolation with Cavarax, learning about civilizations and species he had never encountered. The concept of returning to humanity, to people who would be completely alien to him despite being his own species, was terrifying. I don't want to go, he admitted. I don't know them. I know you. Cavarax's expression softened, as much as a crystalline dragon's features could. You have always known this day would come, Orin. I took you not just to save you, but because I saw something in humanity worth preserving, worth enhancing. Everything I have taught you was in preparation for this moment. A distant explosion rocked the sanctuary as the Vraxian ships renewed their attack, targeting the dimensional breach to widen it further. They are persistent, Cavarax noted. We have little time. The dragon turned back to the console, his claws moving with precision across the controls. A new holographic display appeared, showing a complex molecular structure. What is that? Orin asked. Your legacy, and mine, Cavarax replied. The Eldari created beings like me as guardians of knowledge, but they also left safeguards, ways to pass their understanding to worthy successor species. The dragon's chest compartment opened, revealing a small crystalline object, similar in composition to Cavarax's scales, but concentrated into a dense, luminescent form. This contains a fragment of my consciousness and selected knowledge from the archives, the dragon explained. I've been preparing it since you were a child, adapting Eldari transfer protocols to human physiology. Orin stared at the crystal with apprehension. What does it do? It will change you, Orin. Not in ways visible to others, but in your capacity to understand and manipulate the underlying principles of reality. You will remain human, but you will see as the Eldari saw. Another explosion, closer this time, shook the spire. Warning signals flashed across the holographic displays. Multiple breaches detected, an automated voice announced. Sanctuary integrity compromised. Cavarax looked into Orin's eyes. The choice must be yours. I can send you back to Earth as you are, a human with exceptional knowledge but still limited by human perception. Or you can accept this gift and return as something more, a bridge between what humanity is and what it might become. Orin looked at the crystal, then at the displays showing Earth under siege. His entire life had been spent learning from Cavarax, trusting the ancient guardian's wisdom. Despite his fear, he knew what his answer must be. I'll take it, he said, reaching for the crystal. Cavarax nodded gravely. It will be painful, initially. The integration process requires rewriting certain neural pathways. Orin took a deep breath, closing his fingers around the crystal. Immediately, it began to glow brighter, responding to his touch. What will happen to you? I will remain to ensure the sanctuary's collapse is complete, the dragon replied. The knowledge here is too dangerous to fall into Vraxian hands. But you'll die, Orin protested. Cavarax made a sound that might have been a laugh. I was created, Orin, not born. My purpose was to preserve knowledge until it could be passed to those worthy of it. In you, I have fulfilled that purpose. Before Orin could argue further, the crystal in his hand pulsed, sending tendrils of luminescent energy up his arm. He gasped as the energy spread throughout his body, a burning sensation that quickly intensified to near unbearable levels. His vision blurred, then sharpened dramatically. The world suddenly revealed in spectra he had never perceived before. Cavarax's voice seemed to come from both outside and inside his mind simultaneously. I have programmed a portal to take you to Earth, to a location where you will find others who can help you. The transfer will complete during transit. Orin wanted to respond, to thank his guardian and teacher, but the pain of the transformation had robbed him of speech. He could only nod, tears streaming down his face. The dragon activated a final sequence on the console. A portal appeared, different from the Vraxian breach, smoother, more controlled, bearing the unmistakable energy signature of Eldari technology. Go now, Cavarax urged. Remember everything I taught you. Remember that knowledge without compassion is merely power, and power without purpose leads only to destruction. With the last of his strength before the transformation overwhelmed him, Orin embraced the dragon's massive foreleg. Then, clutching the crystal that was rapidly integrating with his body, he stumbled through the portal. The last thing he saw before the dimensional crossing took him was Cavarax turning to face the approaching Vraxian ships, the dragon's form glowing with gathered energy, preparing for a final stand to protect the sanctuary, and to give Orin time to escape. Then darkness claimed him, and Orin knew nothing more as he hurtled through the dimensional void toward a home he had never known, carrying within him the legacy of an ancient civilization and the wisdom of the guardian who had raised him. In the depths of space, Admiral Zaret received the report from his dimensional breach team with growing concern. The operation to locate and access the Eldari sanctuary had taken decades of research and preparation, consuming resources that might have been better used in the final assault on Earth. Now, just as success seemed within reach, everything was falling apart. Explain again, he demanded of the science officer, mandibles clicking in agitation. "The sanctuary is collapsing, Admiral," the officer repeated. "Not from our attack, but from within." The elderly guardian initiated some kind of controlled dimensional implosion. "Our breach teams report the archive islands are already gone, consumed by the collapse." "And the guardian itself?" "Engaged our forces directly. 3 ships lost before the remainder retreated through the breach." Zaret's compound eyes narrowed. "And what of the anomalous reading? The human life sign?" The science officer hesitated. "Gone, Admiral. A separate dimensional portal was detected moments before we lost contact with the breach team. We believe the Guardian sent the human elsewhere." "Where?" "Unknown, Admiral. But given the Guardian's apparent protective stance toward the human, the most logical destination would be Earth." Zaret turned to the tactical display, studying the blockade formation around the human homeworld. After over a century of systematic campaign against human expansion, the Vraxian forces had finally cornered the species in their home system. The Prophet's vision was nearing fulfillment. Humanity would be harvested, their genetic potential absorbed into the Vraxian collective, accelerating the species' ascension. But now, an unknown variable had been introduced. A human raised by an elderly guardian, potentially carrying elderly knowledge. Exactly the scenario the Prophet had warned against. "Intensify the blockade," Zaret ordered. "No ships in or out of the Sol system. And deploy the phase disruptors. I want any dimensional anomalies detected and neutralized immediately." "Admiral," the tactical officer interjected, "deploying the phase disruptors will alert the humans to our imminent attack. We lose the advantage of surprise." "Surprise is no longer relevant," Zaret replied coldly. The Prophet was clear. If elderly influence reached humanity, we would need to accelerate the harvest. "Prepare all ships for the final assault. Earth falls within 1 standard day." As the Vraxian command ship transmitted the new orders to the blockade fleet, a small dimensional ripple went undetected at the edge of the system. A portal opening briefly to deposit a single human form before collapsing back into nothingness. Orin awakened to pain and disorientation, his entire body feeling as if it had been dismantled and reassembled incorrectly. He lay on cold, damp ground, the unfamiliar sensation of natural gravity pulling at him after a lifetime in the sanctuary's carefully calibrated environment. Opening his eyes was a shock. The world appeared transformed, visible across multiple spectra simultaneously. He could see heat signatures, electromagnetic fields, even the subtle dimensional instabilities left by his arrival. Closing his eyes again, Orin focused on what Cavarax had taught him about mental discipline, gradually bringing the overwhelming sensory input under control. When he opened his eyes again, the world had stabilized somewhat. He found himself in what appeared to be an abandoned structure, a small building with broken windows and collapsed sections of roof. Through one such opening, he could see unfamiliar stars. Earth. He was on Earth. The realization brought a wave of conflicting emotions, fear, excitement, grief for Cavarax, and a profound sense of dislocation. Everything he had ever known was gone. The sanctuary collapsed, his dragon guardian presumably destroyed in the process. Orin pushed himself to a sitting position, wincing at the lingering pain of the transformation. The crystal Cavarax had given him was gone, fully integrated into his being. He could feel its energy pulsing through him, restructuring his consciousness in ways he was only beginning to understand. Neural integration at 67%. He heard/felt Cavarax's voice in his mind. Cognitive enhancement protocols initializing. Not truly Cavarax, Orin realized, but an echo, the fragment of the dragon's consciousness that had been stored in the crystal. A guide to help him navigate the transformation. "Where am I?" Orin asked aloud, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. "Southeastern region of the North American continent," the echo responded. "Approximately 30 kilometers from the nearest human settlement." Cavarax selected this location to minimize the risk of detection during dimensional transit. Orin struggled to his feet, his enhanced senses immediately cataloging his surroundings in far greater detail than normal human perception would allow. The building appeared to be an abandoned research outpost, long since stripped of anything valuable. Beyond its walls lay a forest, the trees unfamiliar to someone who had only seen Earth flora in historical records. "What now?" he asked the echo. Complete neural integration will require approximately 6 hours, came the response. During this time, you should remain hidden. Vraxian forces have likely detected the dimensional disturbance and will be searching for you. Orin nodded, finding a relatively intact corner of the building to settle in. As the integration process continued, he closed his eyes, focusing on assimilating the flood of information pouring into his consciousness. The knowledge Cavarax had chosen to include was overwhelming. Elderly understanding of dimensional physics, energy manipulation techniques, advanced biotechnology, and, most critically, detailed analysis of Vraxian weaknesses. The dragon had been preparing him for this moment for years, selecting precisely the knowledge that would give humanity a fighting chance against their would-be conquerors. Hours passed as Orin's mind and body adapted to the changes. When he finally opened his eyes again, the world appeared different once more, still enhanced beyond normal human perception. But now the information was organized, categorized, accessible without overwhelming him. Neural integration complete, the Echo announced. Cognitive enhancement protocols active. Elderly knowledge base accessible. Orin stood, surprised to find that the earlier pain had vanished completely. He felt stronger, more balanced, his thoughts clearer and faster than ever before. The nearest human settlement, he began, is a resistance outpost, the Echo completed. One of several operating beyond Vraxian observation. Cavarax identified it during his periodic monitoring of Earth. This was news to Orin. Resistance? Against the Vraxians? Affirmative. Despite the blockade and the loss of their colonies, humans continue to resist Vraxian influence. The settlement designated Haven was established 23 years ago as a staging area for guerrilla operations against Vraxian ground forces. Orin absorbed this information, feeling a strange pride in his species' resilience. Perhaps he and humanity weren't as alien to each other as he had feared. How do I find them? Directional guidance is available, the Echo replied. However, caution is advised. The settlement will perceive you as an outsider. Your neural patterns and energy signature differ significantly from baseline humans. I'll worry about convincing them when I get there, Orin decided. Right now, I need to move. If the Vraxians are searching for dimensional anomalies, staying here is dangerous. With the Echo's guidance, Orin set out through the unfamiliar forest. His enhanced senses made navigation simple, even in the darkness. He could perceive heat signatures of animal life, identify plants that might be toxic, and detect subtle electromagnetic fields that indicated technology, both active and dormant. As he walked, Orin began testing some of the abilities the integration had granted him. He found he could manipulate small energy fields, creating light or heat at will. More impressively, he could perceive dimensional weaknesses, places where the fabric of reality was thinner, potentially allowing for travel between points without crossing the intervening space. Short-range dimensional shifting, the Echo explained when Orin questioned this ability. Limited to approximately 500 meters in Earth's dimensional fabric. Extended use will drain your biological energy reserves. By dawn, Orin had covered more than 20 kilometers, moving far faster than a normal human could have managed. The forest had given way to rolling hills, and in the distance, he could see what appeared to be defensive structures, camouflaged but visible to his enhanced perception. Haven perimeter, the Echo confirmed. Automated defense systems active. Approach with caution. Orin slowed his pace, considering how best to make contact. He had no idea how the resistance would react to a stranger appearing out of nowhere, especially one with his unusual abilities. Before he could decide on a course of action, his enhanced hearing picked up the sound of engines, aerial vehicles approaching rapidly from the east. Vraxian scout ships, the Echo warned. 5 units. Search pattern indicates they are tracking dimensional residue from your arrival. Orin looked toward the settlement, then back in the direction of the approaching ships. If he ran for Haven now, he would lead the Vraxians directly to it. If he stayed in the open, he would be captured or killed. The third option came to him not from the Echo, but from his own understanding of the elderly knowledge now integrated into his consciousness. The dimensional fabric here was relatively stable, but with the right application of energy, I can create a false trail, he realized aloud. Mimic the dimensional signature of my arrival, but lead them away from Haven. Theoretically possible, the Echo acknowledged. But dangerous. Your control of these abilities is untested. Orin made his decision quickly. Focusing his mind as Cavarax had taught him, he reached out to the dimensional fabric around him. He could perceive it now, not just conceptually but visually, a complex lattice of energy and probability. Carefully, he began to manipulate it, creating a small dimensional ripple that mimicked his arrival signature but pointed away from Haven, toward a range of mountains to the north. The effort drained him more than expected, leaving him momentarily dizzy. But when he checked his work with his enhanced senses, he could see the false trail clearly, a beacon that would draw the Vraxian scouts away. Sure enough, the approaching ships altered course, following the fabricated dimensional disturbance. Orin watched them disappear toward the mountains, knowing the deception would only buy him limited time. With renewed urgency, he turned toward Haven. As he approached the settlement's perimeter, he could detect the defensive systems more clearly, primitive by the standards of the knowledge now in his head, but ingeniously designed to avoid Vraxian detection. Hands up. Don't move. The voice came from behind him, speaking a language that should have been unfamiliar, but that Orin understood perfectly. Another gift of the integration. He raised his hands slowly, turning to face a human woman in camouflaged clothing, aiming what appeared to be a modified pulse rifle at his chest. Her face was weathered, her eyes hard with suspicion. "Who are you?" she demanded. "How did you find this place?" Orin considered his response carefully. The truth seemed too fantastic, yet lies would only complicate matters once the truth inevitably emerged. "My name is Orin," he said simply. "I was raised by a guardian called Cavarax. I'm here to help Earth against the Vraxians." The woman's expression didn't change, but Orin's enhanced perception detected a slight shift in her vital signs: surprise, curiosity. "Cavarax," she repeated. "The dragon." Now it was Orin's turn to be surprised. "You know of him?" A faint, grim smile touched the woman's lips. "The dragon of New Sacramento is a legend among the resistance. The creature that appeared during the first Vraxian attack took something from the ruins and vanished." Her eyes narrowed. "No one knows what it took." "A baby," Orin said quietly. "Me." For a long moment, the woman stared at him, weapon still trained on his chest. Then she activated a communication device on her wrist. "Commander, this is Recon 3. I've got a situation at the western perimeter. Subject claims to be, well, you're not going to believe this. Better come see for yourself." Within minutes, Orin found himself surrounded by a squad of resistance fighters, all regarding him with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. Their leader, a tall man with a cybernetic left eye and scarred face, studied Orin intently. "I'm Commander Vance," he said finally. "Elena here says you claim to be the child taken by the dragon of New Sacramento." "I don't claim anything," Orin replied calmly. "I'm simply telling you who I am. Whether you believe me is your decision." The commander's cybernetic eye whirred softly, scanning Orin. "Your biometrics are unusual, not quite human standard. The integration process altered my physiology somewhat," Orin explained. "I'm still human, just enhanced." "Integration process?" Vance repeated. Before Orin could respond, alarms sounded throughout the perimeter. A resistance fighter ran up to the commander, breathless. "Sir, Vraxian patrols, closing fast from the north. They've changed course. They're heading straight for us." Vance swore under his breath, glancing accusingly at Orin. "Convenient timing. I created a false trail to lead them away," Orin said quickly. "But they must have realized the deception. We need to move now." "We?" Vance's tone was icy. "You show up out of nowhere, with unusual biometrics, and suddenly Vraxians are at our doorstep. Give me one reason why I shouldn't assume you're leading them to us." Orin met the commander's gaze steadily. "Because I can help you fight them. The knowledge Cavarax gave me. It's exactly what humanity needs to survive what's coming." The sound of approaching engines grew louder. Vance made his decision. "Elena, take a team and delay them. Standard hit-and-fade tactics." He turned back to Orin. "You're coming with me. One wrong move, and I put a pulse round through your head." "Clear." "Crystal," Orin agreed. As Elena's team moved out, Vance led Orin deeper into the settlement, a surprisingly sophisticated complex partially built into the hillside, well camouflaged from aerial observation. Everywhere they went, people stopped to stare at the stranger, word of his claimed identity spreading rapidly. "In here," Vance ordered, gesturing to a reinforced door that led to what appeared to be a command center. Inside, displays showed the settlement's defenses and the approaching Vraxian forces. 8 scout ships now, moving in a search pattern. An older woman with close-cropped white hair looked up from the central console. Vance. What's happening? Possible breach, Dr. Reese. And a visitor with an interesting story. He pushed Orin forward. Claims to be the baby taken by the new Sacramento dragon. Dr. Reese's eyes widened. That was over 150 years ago. Time flows differently in Cavarax's sanctuary, Orin explained. I'm 20 by my reckoning, though much older by your calendar. The doctor approached him, scientific curiosity evident in her expression. Cavarax? The dragon had a name? He was an elderly creation, Orin said. A guardian of knowledge. He raised me, taught me, and before the sanctuary was destroyed, he gave me this. He raised his hand, concentrating briefly. A small sphere of energy formed above his palm, glowing with a blue-purple light reminiscent of Cavarax's scales. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the manifestation of energy. Dr. Reese reached toward it hesitantly, then pulled back. Elderly energy manipulation, she breathed. The theories were right. They could control fundamental forces directly. Vance was less impressed. Parlor tricks won't help us against Vraxian warships. Orin closed his fist, dissipating the energy sphere. That was just a demonstration. The knowledge I carry goes far deeper. Vraxian weaknesses, elderly defensive technologies, dimensional physics principles that could give humanity an edge. A sudden explosion rocked the command center. One of the displays showed Elena's team engaged with Vraxian ground forces near the perimeter. They're deploying shock troops, Vance observed grimly. This isn't a standard search pattern anymore. They know exactly what they're looking for. Me, Orin confirmed. Or more precisely, the elderly knowledge I carry. The Vraxians believe it threatens their prophecy of ascension. Dr. Reese turned to him sharply. You know about the prophecy? Cavarax explained it. The Vraxians believe that by conquering and assimilating certain species, particularly those with specific genetic markers, they'll evolve into beings of pure energy. Humanity has those markers. That's why they've been so determined to conquer Earth. Vance's expression darkened. We've lost over 30 colonies and billions of lives because of some insectoid religious fantasy? It's more complex than that, Orin replied. The Vraxians aren't entirely wrong. The elderly did transcend their physical form, just not in the way the Vraxians believe. And certain species, including humans, do have genetic potential for rapid development. The Vraxians are trying to harvest that potential for themselves, eliminating the competition in the process. Another explosion, closer this time. The command center's displays showed multiple breaches in the perimeter defenses. Fascinating xenobiology lecture, Vance said sarcastically. But right now, we need practical solutions. If you really want to help, now's the time. Orin nodded, moving to the central console. His enhanced perception allowed him to understand the Resistance's technology instantly, despite never having encountered it before. Your defensive systems are impressive for what you're working with, he observed, but they're not optimized against Vraxian sensory capabilities. His fingers moved across the console, making adjustments faster than the human eye could follow. The displays flickered, then stabilized, showing a new configuration for the settlement's defensive grid. There, Orin said. I've recalibrated your cloaking fields to disrupt the specific frequencies Vraxian compound eyes perceive. It won't make us invisible, but it will degrade their targeting accuracy significantly. Dr. Reese studied the changes with obvious astonishment. How did you? We can discuss the technical details later, Orin interrupted, turning to Vance. This is only a temporary measure. The Vraxians are here because of me, and they won't leave until they've either captured or killed me. I need to draw them away from Haven. Vance crossed his arms. And how exactly do you plan to do that? I need access to your communications array. If I can broadcast a specific energy signature, one that mimics elderly technology, I can make them think I've left the area entirely. The commander hesitated, clearly torn between skepticism and the desperate need for any advantage against the attacking forces. Sir, a resistance fighter called from one of the monitoring stations. Elena's team is pinned down. They can't hold much longer. Vance made his decision. Do it. But Dr. Reese supervises every move you make. Orin nodded and quickly moved to the communications station, Dr. Reese following closely. As he worked, reconfiguring the Resistance's equipment to emit the specific dimensional signature he needed, alarms continued to sound throughout the settlement. This equipment is primitive compared to what I'm used to, Orin muttered, but the principles are the same. I just need to. His hands blurred over the controls, channeling a small portion of his own elderly-enhanced energy into the communications array. The station hummed, then emitted a pulse of energy that was invisible to normal human perception, but that Orin could see clearly. A rippling wave of dimensional disturbance. What did you just do? Dr. Reese asked. Created a dimensional echo, Orin explained. To Vraxian sensors, it will appear as if an elderly energy signature just moved rapidly away from this location, too quickly for them to track directly, but leaving a trail they can follow. On the displays, the effect was immediate. The Vraxian ships broke off their attack on the settlement, reorienting to follow the false trail Orin had created. The ground forces began to withdraw as well, pulling back from their engagement with Elena's team. It's working, Vance said, surprised. They're actually falling back. Not for long, Orin cautioned. Once they realize it's another deception, they'll return, with greater numbers and more determination. Dr. Reese studied him with a scientist's analytical gaze. You've been preparing for this, haven't you? Your entire life with this. Cavarax, it was all preparation for helping humanity against the Vraxians. Orin nodded solemnly. Cavarax saw something in humanity worth preserving. He believed humans could achieve in thousands of years what took other species millions. That's why the Vraxians fear you, and why they've been so determined to conquer Earth before humanity realizes its full potential. Vance's cybernetic eye whirred as he reassessed Orin. So what's your plan? Beyond temporary distractions. I need to get to Earth's defense command, Orin replied. The knowledge I carry can be used to upgrade your planetary defenses, make them truly effective against the Vraxian fleet. Earth Defense Command is in the Rocky Mountain Complex, Vance said. Heavily fortified, but also under constant Vraxian observation. Getting in won't be easy, even with your abilities. I don't need easy, Orin stated. I just need possible. Before Vance could respond, Elena entered the command center, her armor scorched from combat, but her expression triumphant. Vraxians are in full retreat, she reported. Whatever you did, it worked. But we lost Jensen and Carrillo. A somber mood fell over the room at the mention of the casualties. Orin felt the weight of responsibility. These people had died because the Vraxians were hunting him. I'm sorry for your losses, he said quietly. Elena studied him with unexpected intensity. Jensen had a theory about the dragon of New Sacramento. He believed it wasn't just taking something from the ruins, it was saving something. Looks like he was right. Vance cleared his throat. We need to move quickly. The Vraxians will be back once they realize they've been tricked again. He turned to Orin. If we're going to get you to the Rocky Mountain Complex, we need a plan and transport. Dr. Reese stepped forward. The Nightwing is our best option. It's the only craft we have with enough range and stealth capability. The Nightwing is experimental, Vance objected. Barely tested. It's also our only chance, Dr. Reese countered. And with his knowledge, she nodded toward Orin. Perhaps we can improve its systems before departure. Orin found himself being led through the settlement toward what appeared to be an underground hangar. The Nightwing, as they called it, was immediately recognizable as a hybrid of human and salvaged alien technology, sleek and predatory in design, but with obvious integration issues. Impressive, Orin commented, running his hand along the craft's hull. But your dimensional dampeners are misaligned. The energy bleed would make you visible to Vraxian sensors within minutes. Dr. Reese smiled thinly. Care to fix that for us? Over the next few hours, as the Resistance prepared for his departure, Orin worked alongside Dr. Reese and her engineering team, applying his elderly-enhanced knowledge to improve the Nightwing's systems. The work helped distract him from the grief of losing Cavarax, the only parent he had ever known, and the overwhelming responsibility he now carried. The power coupling needs to be recalibrated, he explained to one of the engineers. Vraxian sensors detect the specific harmonic resonance of human technology. If we shift the frequency by 0.3 terahertz, the integration of elderly knowledge made such adjustments intuitive for him, though explaining them to others proved challenging. The gap between his understanding and even the most brilliant human scientists was substantial, not because of any inherent superiority, but because he stood on the shoulders of a civilization that had advanced far beyond humanity's current level. As night fell, the Nightwing was ready, transformed from an experimental prototype into something that might actually survive the journey to the Rocky Mountain complex. Vance assembled a small team for the mission, Elena as pilot, 2 resistance fighters as security, and Dr. Reese to continue working with Orin on applying his knowledge to Earth's defenses. "We launch at dawn," Vance informed them. "The Vraxian patrols are thinnest then, and we've detected a temporary gap in their sensor network that should give you a clean exit." That night, unable to sleep despite exhaustion, Orin stood at the edge of the settlement, looking up at the unfamiliar stars. His enhanced vision could detect the Vraxian blockade ships in orbit, massive warships positioned to prevent any escape from the planet they intended to harvest. "Homesick," Elena's voice came from behind him. She approached, no longer pointing a weapon at him, but still maintaining a cautious distance. "Hard to be homesick for a place you've never known," Orin replied. "Earth is my species' home, but not mine personally." "What was it like?" she asked. "Growing up with a dragon." Orin smiled faintly. Cavarax was stern but fair. Everything was a lesson, every conversation, every activity. But there was kindness too, in his way. He could have simply stored me in stasis if all he wanted was to preserve a human specimen. Instead, he raised me, taught me, prepared me. For this moment, Elena observed. To return and save humanity. "That sounds more dramatic than it is," Orin said. "I'm just a conduit for knowledge that should have been humanity's birthright." The Elderly believed younger races would eventually reach the same understanding they achieved. The Vraxians are trying to short-circuit that process, stealing potential rather than developing it naturally. Elena studied his profile in the moonlight. "You look human, but you talk like something else." "The integration changed me," Orin acknowledged. "I perceive reality differently now, but I am still human at my core." Cavarax was insistent about that I understand and embrace my humanity even as I carried elderly knowledge. "Is that why you came back? Because you feel some connection to humanity?" Orin considered the question carefully. "Partly, but also because it was the right thing to do. Cavarax taught me that knowledge without compassion is merely power, and power without purpose leads only to destruction." Elena nodded slowly, as if coming to a decision. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without sleep deprivation." As she turned to leave, Orin called after her. "The legends about the dragon of New Sacramento, what exactly do they say?" Elena paused. "That during humanity's darkest hour, when the Vraxians first attacked, a creature of myth appeared and took something precious from the ruins. Some believe it was a weapon, others think it was knowledge." She smiled faintly. Jensen always insisted it was hope. With that, she left Orin to his thoughts and the stars above. Dawn came too quickly. The Nightwing, loaded and ready, waited in the underground hangar as Vance delivered final instructions to the team. "Your priority is getting Orin to the Rocky Mountain complex," he told them. "Everything else is secondary. If you're detected, don't engage, just run. We can't afford to lose him or the knowledge he carries." Elena nodded from the pilot's seat. "Understood, Commander." Dr. Reese and the 2 security personnel, Rodriguez and Chun, were already aboard. Orin prepared to join them when Vance pulled him aside. "I'm trusting you with my people's lives," the commander said quietly. "Don't make me regret it." "I won't," Orin promised. "And Commander, thank you for believing me." Vance's expression remained stern. "I'm not sure I do entirely. But right now, belief is a luxury we can't afford. Results are what matter." The hangar doors opened, revealing the pre-dawn sky. The Nightwing's engines hummed to life, nearly silent thanks to Orin's modifications. As they prepared for takeoff, an alarm sounded throughout the settlement. "Vraxian ships," came the urgent report. "Multiple signatures, approaching fast." Vance swore. "They must have realized the deception sooner than we expected. Launch now." Elena didn't hesitate, piloting the Nightwing out of the hangar and immediately engaging the stealth systems Orin had enhanced. The craft shimmered briefly, then seemed to fade from visual perception, not truly invisible, but difficult to focus on directly. "Dimensional dampeners holding," Dr. Reese reported from her station. "No energy bleed detected." Through the viewport, Oren could see the Vraxian ships, a full squadron this time, not just scouts. They were converging on Haven with obvious intent to destroy rather than search. They're going to attack the settlement, he realized aloud. Because of me. Elena's hands tightened on the controls. Vance knew the risks. Everyone at Haven did. We have to help them, Oren insisted. Our orders are clear, Rodriguez reminded him. Get you to the Rocky Mountain complex. Everything else is secondary. Oren's enhanced perception could detect the settlement's defenses activating. Impressive for human technology, but hopelessly outmatched against a full Vraxian assault force. Haven would be destroyed, and everyone there would die, because of him. The knowledge within him, elderly understanding of dimensional physics and energy manipulation, offered a solution. Dangerous, untested, but possible. Elena, he said urgently, take us higher. Directly above the settlement. That wasn't the plan, she objected. Trust me, I can help them, but I need altitude and line of sight. Elena hesitated, then nodded sharply. The Nightwing banked, climbing rapidly to position itself above Haven, just as the first Vraxian energy weapons fired down at the settlement. What are you going to do? Dr. Reese asked, concern evident in her voice. Something Cavarax theorized but never tested. Oren replied, moving to the center of the cabin. A dimensional shelter, a temporary pocket of altered space-time that can deflect energy weapons. That's impossible, Dr. Reese stated flatly. The power requirements alone would exceed anything human technology can generate. Oren finished for her. But I'm not using technology. I'm channeling the elderly energy directly. Before anyone could object further, Oren closed his eyes, focusing his mind as Cavarax had taught him. He reached out with his enhanced senses, perceiving the dimensional fabric surrounding Haven. The Vraxian energy weapons were already impacting the settlement's shields, which were failing rapidly. Oren extended his hands, channeling the elderly energy within him outward. The strain was immediate and intense, far greater than anything he had attempted previously. His body began to tremble with effort, a thin line of blood trickling from his nose. What's happening to him? Chen asked worriedly. He's doing something impossible, Dr. Reese whispered, staring at the readouts on her instruments. The dimensional energy readings are off the scale. Below them, a shimmering dome of blue-purple energy, the same color as Cavarax's scales, began to form over Haven. The first Vraxian energy blast struck it and dissipated harmlessly, absorbed into the dimensional shelter Oren was creating. The effort was tearing at him from within. Human physiology, even enhanced as his wasn't designed to channel such energies directly. But he persisted, holding the shelter in place as the Vraxian ships intensified their attack, pouring destructive energy down onto the protective dome. They're focusing all their fire on his shield, Elena reported. Haven's defenses are holding under the reduced pressure. He can't maintain this, Dr. Reese warned, monitoring Oren's vital signs. His cellular structure is destabilizing. Oren could feel it, the damage the energy channeling was causing to his body. But he also sensed something else. The Vraxian ships were depleting their energy reserves against his shield. If he could hold just a little longer. There, he gasped. Now, Elena. Understanding instantly, Elena activated the Nightwing's weapons systems, modest by military standards but enhanced by Oren's modifications. The craft decloaked momentarily as it fired a concentrated pulse of energy at the nearest Vraxian ship, striking precisely where its shields were weakest after expending so much power against Oren's dimensional shelter. The Vraxian vessel exploded spectacularly, debris damaging two nearby ships. The sudden counterattack created confusion in the Vraxian formation, their coordinated assault faltering. Oren collapsed to the deck, the dimensional shelter below flickering but holding for a few crucial seconds longer. Just enough time for Haven's defenses to target the disorganized Vraxian ships. Ground-based energy weapons fired upward, striking with surprising effectiveness thanks to the targeting adjustments Oren had made the previous day. Two more Vraxian ships erupted in flames, plummeting from the sky. The remaining vessels broke off their attack, retreating to a safer altitude to regroup. It worked, Elena said incredulously, immediately recloaking the Nightwing. They're pulling back. Dr. Reese knelt beside Oren, who lay semi-conscious on the deck. At what cost? His cellular damage is severe. Worth it, Oren managed to whisper. Haven survives. Elena set course away from the battle zone, accelerating the Nightwing to its maximum stealth speed. We need to get him to medical facilities. The Rocky Mountain Complex has advanced biotechnology. If we make it there, Rodriguez pointed out grimly. That little light show probably alerted every Vraxian in the hemisphere to our presence. Dr. Reese administered emergency treatment to Oren, injecting stabilizers to slow the cellular degradation. What you did was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed, she told him softly. Possibly both. Oren managed a weak smile. Cavarax would say the same. The journey to the Rocky Mountain Complex was tense, but mercifully uneventful. Elena's skilled piloting, combined with the Nightwing's enhanced stealth systems, allowed them to avoid Vraxian patrols. Oren drifted in and out of consciousness, his body struggling to repair the damage caused by channeling such intense energies. The Rocky Mountain Complex came into view as the Nightwing descended through cloud cover, a massive installation built into the mountainside, heavily fortified and surrounded by the most advanced defensive systems remaining on Earth. As a command center for humanity's resistance against the Vraxian blockade, it represented humanity's last, best hope. Rocky Mountain Control, this is Nightwing, Elena transmitted. Authorization code Sierra Echo 927. We have a priority package in a medical emergency. There was a tense pause before the response came. Nightwing, this is Rocky Mountain Control. Authorization confirmed. You are cleared for approach to Hangar 7. Medical teams are standing by. As the Nightwing descended toward the designated hangar, Oren regained full consciousness, his enhanced physiology already beginning to repair the worst of the damage. We made it, Dr. Reese told him with evident relief. You're going to get the medical attention you need. The medical attention can wait, Oren said, struggling to sit up. I need to speak with whoever commands Earth's defenses immediately. The Vraxians aren't just continuing their blockade. They're preparing for a final assault. How can you know that? Chen asked. The attack on Haven was too aggressive, too determined, Oren explained. They're accelerating their timetable. Something's changed. The Nightwing landed in a massive underground hangar, immediately surrounded by security personnel and medical staff. As promised, Earth Defense Command had sent a full medical team, which rushed aboard as soon as the craft's ramp descended. Priority medical evacuation, the lead doctor announced, moving to transfer Oren to a hovering gurney. No, Oren insisted, pushing aside the medical equipment. I need to speak with your commanding officer immediately. Earth's survival depends on it. A distinguished older man in a formal military uniform stepped forward from the security detail. I am General Takeda, Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces. And you are? His name is Oren, Elena interjected. And you're going to want to hear what he has to say, General. Takeda's stern expression didn't change, but he nodded slightly. Very well. Secure medical suite, then. We can talk while the doctors assess your condition. Within the hour, Oren found himself in a high-security medical chamber, surrounded by Earth's top military and scientific leadership. General Takeda had assembled his command staff and leading researchers upon hearing the initial report from Elena and Dr. Reese. Let me understand this clearly, Takeda said after the introductions were complete. You claim to be the infant taken from New Sacramento by the so-called dragon, raised in a dimension where time flows differently. And now you possess knowledge from an extinct alien civilization that can help us defeat the Vraxians? Put so bluntly, the story sounded fantastical even to Oren's ears. Yes, General, that's essentially correct. And you expect me to believe this? Takeda's tone was skeptical but not dismissive. I expect you to evaluate the evidence, Oren replied calmly. Dr. Reese can confirm the modifications I made to Haven's defensive systems and the Nightwing. Those modifications alone represent technology beyond current human capabilities. Dr. Reese nodded confirmation. The dimensional dampening techniques he implemented are unlike anything in our theoretical models, yet they work perfectly. And what he did to protect Haven? She shook her head in lingering disbelief. A dimensional shelter, one of the scientific advisors murmured. Theoretically impossible with our understanding of physics. Not impossible, Oren corrected. Just beyond your current development stage. The elderly achieved these technologies through natural progression, just as humanity would eventually. if given the chance to survive and develop. General Takeda studied Orin intently. And you believe the Vraxians are planning a final assault? When? Soon. Within days, possibly hours, Orin replied. Their prophet, their religious leader, has been pushing for the completion of what they call the harvest for decades. My appearance, carrying elderly knowledge, represents their worst fear, that humanity might gain the understanding needed to truly challenge them. How can you be so certain of their timetable? Another military officer asked. Because I can sense their preparations, Orin explained. The integration with elderly knowledge enhanced my perception. I can detect dimensional disturbances, including the ones created when multiple Vraxian ships coordinate for a large-scale attack. This caused a stir among the scientific advisors. One of them, a woman with cybernetic enhancements similar to Vance's, stepped forward. I'm Dr. Mirza, head of Earth's Xenophysics Division. If what you're saying is true, your abilities could provide us with early warning capabilities we've never had before. They can do far more than that, Orin stated. I can help you modify Earth's defensive grid to counteract Vraxian technology directly. Their ships have specific vulnerabilities that the Eldari documented centuries ago. Vulnerabilities your current sensors can't detect, but that your weapons could exploit with proper recalibration. General Takeda exchanged glances with his staff. If this is true, it could change everything. But time is critical. How quickly could these modifications be implemented? With direct access to your defense mainframe and a team of your best engineers, I could have the primary systems recalibrated within 12 hours, Orin said. But there's more than just defensive capabilities at stake. The Eldari knowledge includes understanding of the Vraxians' evolutionary path and psychological triggers. We don't just need to fight them. We need to break their belief in the prophecy of ascension. Psychological warfare, Takeda nodded approvingly. Break their will to fight. Exactly. The prophet maintains control through the promise of evolutionary transcendence. If we can demonstrate that their fundamental beliefs are flawed, they might retreat, Dr. Mirza finished the thought. Or at least hesitate long enough for us to strengthen our position. General Takeda made his decision. Dr. Mirza, assemble your team and give Orin full access to the defense mainframe. Security protocols Alpha through Delta remain in effect, but expedite all clearances. He turned to Orin. I'm trusting you with Earth's last line of defense. If you betray that trust, I understand the responsibility, General. Orin interrupted respectfully. Earth is my home too, even if I've only just returned to it. As the meeting concluded and preparations began, Elena approached Orin. I'm returning to Haven with the Night Wing, she informed him. Vance needs to know what's happening. Orin nodded. Tell him I'm sorry about bringing the Vraxians to his doorstep. And thank him for believing in me, even when he claimed not to. Elena studied him for a moment. You know, when I was a kid, my grandmother used to tell me the legend of the dragon of New Sacramento. She said that someday, when humanity faced extinction, the dragon would return what it had taken, transformed into our salvation. She smiled faintly. I never believed it was anything but a story to give people hope. Shows what I know. With that, she left, leaving Orin to begin the monumental task of upgrading Earth's defenses before the Vraxian assault began. The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Working with Dr. Mirza's team, Orin applied Eldari principles to human technology, creating hybrid systems that far exceeded their original capabilities. His enhanced perception and understanding allowed him to see solutions where Earth scientists saw only limitations. The problem isn't your power generation, he explained as they recalibrated the orbital defense platforms. It's the inefficiency of energy transfer. By creating a dimensional fold at the emission point, we can reduce particle dissipation by 70%. Dr. Mirza and her team watched in amazement as Orin implemented changes that would have taken them decades to develop independently. The defensive grid gradually transformed under his guidance, incorporating principles that bent the rules of physics as humanity understood them. You're not just upgrading our systems, Dr. Mirza observed. You're advancing our entire scientific understanding. Knowledge wants to grow, Orin replied, remembering Kavarax's teachings. The Eldari believed that all sentient species would eventually reach similar conclusions, just through different paths. I'm merely providing shortcuts. As the work progressed, Oren's enhanced senses detected increasing disturbances in the dimensional fabric surrounding Earth. The Vraxian fleet was indeed gathering, coordinating for what would clearly be an overwhelming assault. He reported this to General Takeda, who immediately ordered Earth's remaining military forces to battle stations. "How much time do we have?" the general asked. "Hours at most," Oren replied grimly. "They're almost ready. And our defenses?" "The primary modifications are complete. The orbital platforms and ground-based systems have been recalibrated to target Vraxian vulnerabilities. But there's one more element we need, something to break their psychological resolve." "What did you have in mind?" Oren explained his plan, a desperate gamble that would either save humanity or accelerate its destruction. General Takeda listened with growing concern. "That's audacious," he said finally, "and extremely dangerous for you personally." "It's necessary," Oren insisted. "The Vraxians need to believe their entire religious foundation is flawed. Words won't convince them. They need to see evidence they can't dismiss. And you're willing to risk your life for this?" Oren thought of Kavarax, sacrificing himself to protect the sanctuary and give Oren a chance to escape. "Yes," he said simply. "It's what I was saved for." The general studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Make your preparations. I'll ensure you have whatever you need." 3 hours later, alarms sounded throughout the Rocky Mountain complex. The Vraxian fleet had begun its move, breaking orbit in a coordinated descent toward Earth's atmosphere. Over 500 warships, the largest force ever assembled against the planet, approached in attack formation. In the command center, General Takeda watched the tactical displays with grim determination. All defensive systems online. Civilian populations are in emergency shelters. This is it, humanity's last stand. Oren stood beside him, now recovered from his earlier injuries thanks to advanced medical treatment and his enhanced physiology. "Not our last stand, General. Our turning point." The first wave of Vraxian ships entered the outer defense perimeter. Earth's newly modified weapons systems fired precision energy beams that struck exactly where Oren had predicted the Vraxian shields would be weakest. To the astonishment of Earth's military leaders, the enemy vessels began to fall, their supposedly impenetrable defenses failing against the recalibrated weapons. Dozens of Vraxian ships plummeted from the sky, trailing smoke and debris as they crashed into unpopulated areas, the targeting system specifically modified to avoid civilian casualties even in defeat. "It's working," Dr. Mirza exclaimed, watching the tactical displays with wide eyes. "Their shields are collapsing exactly where you predicted." But Oren's expression remained grave. "This is just the first wave, their scouts and lighter vessels. The main battleships are holding back, analyzing our defenses." True to his prediction, the Vraxian attack pattern shifted. The larger warships maintained their altitude, launching concentrated energy attacks from beyond the range of Earth's ground-based weapons. The modified orbital platforms continued to perform admirably, intercepting many of these attacks, but not all. "Defensive grid holding at 78%, a tactical officer reported. "But power reserves are depleting faster than anticipated." General Takeda turned to Oren. "How long can we maintain this defense?" 3 hours at current expenditure rates, Oren calculated. "Maybe 4 if we reroute power from secondary systems. But the Vraxians can sustain their attack much longer. We need to implement the final phase now, while we still have sufficient defenses to protect the civilian population." The general nodded sharply. "Proceed." Oren moved to a specialized communications console that Dr. Mirza's team had modified to his specifications. This was the culmination of his plan, the desperate gamble that might save humanity from extinction. "Initiating broad-spectrum transmission," he announced, targeting the Vraxian command frequency. The console hummed to life, channeling energy in patterns that human technology alone could never have achieved. Oren placed his hands on the interface, adding his own Eldari-enhanced abilities to the transmission. "This is Oren, Ward of Kavarax, guardian of Eldari knowledge, to the Vraxian fleet," he began, his voice calm but resonant with power. "Your prophet has misled you. The path to ascension is not through conquest and assimilation, but through understanding and natural evolution." On the main display, they could see the Vraxian attack falter momentarily, his unexpected communication clearly causing confusion among their forces. Proof of my claims will follow, Orin continued. Witness the truth that the prophet has hidden from you. With that, Orin channeled more of his energy into the transmission. The strain was immediate and intense, but he persisted, drawing on everything Cavarax had taught him about dimensional manipulation. A visible beam of energy, blue-purple, like Cavarax's scales, erupted from the Rocky Mountain complex, shooting skyward toward the Vraxian fleet. What is he doing? One of the military officers asked Dr. Mirza. Creating a dimensional window, she replied, her voice hushed with awe, showing them something they can't ignore. In orbit, visible to both the Vraxians and Earth's sensors, a massive display formed in the fabric of space itself, a window into another reality. Through it appeared images of the Elderly, not as energy beings, but as physical entities, tall, graceful, but undeniably corporeal. These are the Elderly as they truly were. Orin's transmission continued, his voice strained with effort. They did not ascend to energy form through conquest or assimilation. They simply evolved beyond this dimensional plane, their physical bodies still intact, but existing in a reality your sensors cannot detect. The dimensional window shifted, showing the Elderly's departure from the known universe, not a transcendence into energy, but a journey through a massive portal to another dimension entirely. The prophecy of ascension is based on a fundamental misunderstanding, Orin explained. The genetic markers you seek to harvest will not accelerate your evolution through assimilation. Each species must follow its own path, develop according to its own nature. The Elderly understood this. It is why they created guardians like Cavarax to protect the natural development of younger races. In the command center, General Takeda watched the Vraxian fleet's reaction closely. The massive ships had ceased their attack entirely. All sensors clearly focused on the dimensional display Orin was projecting. It's working, the general breathed. They're actually listening. Orin's body began to tremble with the strain of maintaining the dimensional window. Blood trickled from his nose and ears, but he pressed on, determined to complete the message. The Vraxian species has its own greatness, he continued. Your natural abilities in bioengineering and adaptive genetics are unmatched in the known galaxy. But the path you have chosen, conquest and forced assimilation, will only lead to stagnation, not ascension. The dimensional window shifted again, showing two possible futures. One of a Vraxian civilization in decline, consumed by genetic instability from forced assimilation. The other of a thriving, advanced society, achieving natural evolutionary breakthroughs through peaceful development. I offer you this knowledge freely, Orin concluded, his voice weakening but still clear. The choice of which path to follow belongs to you alone. With those final words, Orin collapsed, the dimensional window flickering but remaining intact for several crucial moments longer before finally dissipating. Medical staff rushed to his side as Dr. Mirza monitored the Vraxian fleet's response. They're retreating, she announced incredulously. The entire fleet is pulling back to high orbit. General Takeda couldn't hide his astonishment. All of them. Just like that. Not all, Dr. Mirza corrected, studying the sensor readings. A single ship is descending, approaching under minimal power. No weapons active. Defensive systems targeted, the tactical officer reported. Awaiting orders. Hold fire, Takeda commanded. But maintain targeting lock. This could be a trick. The lone Vraxian vessel, smaller than the massive battleships, but still impressive, descended slowly toward the Rocky Mountain complex, eventually hovering a kilometer above the facility. A communication request came through on the same frequency Orin had used. Should we accept? Dr. Mirza asked. Takeda hesitated, then nodded. Audio only. Be prepared to reinitiate full defensive measures at the first sign of hostility. The communication channel opened, filling the command center with the distinctive clicking, multi-tone voice of a Vraxian. This is Admiral Zaret of the Vraxian Command Fleet. I request dialogue with the one called Orin. All eyes turned to the medical bay where doctors were working to stabilize Orin's condition. He's in no condition to speak, Takeda replied. I am General Takeda, Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces. I speak for Earth. The knowledge he has shared. Zaret's voice contains something unexpected, uncertainty. It contradicts the foundations of our society for 1,000 years. Our sensors confirm the authenticity of the dimensional images. They cannot be falsified. Then you understand why your harvest of humanity is based on a flawed premise, Takeda responded. Perhaps. There was a long pause before Zaret continued. The Prophet has called for consultation. The fleet will withdraw to lunar orbit while this revelation is considered. No further hostile action will be taken during this period. It wasn't surrender, but it was more than anyone in Earth's Defense Command had dared hope for. A cessation of hostilities, however temporary. We accept these terms, Takeda agreed cautiously. How long will this consultation period last? Unknown, Zaret replied. The implications are profound. But be warned, General, there are those among us who will reject this knowledge regardless of its authenticity. Prepare your defenses accordingly. With that, the communication ended. The Vraxian vessel ascended, rejoining the fleet as it withdrew to the designated lunar orbit. For the first time in decades, Earth skies were clear of immediate Vraxian threat. In the medical bay, Orin drifted in and out of consciousness. The strain of creating and maintaining the dimensional window had pushed his enhanced physiology to its limits. Dr. Reese, who had remained at the complex to assist with his integration into Earth's defense structure, monitored his condition closely. The cellular damage is extensive, she informed General Takeda when he came to check on Orin's status. But his body is healing itself in ways I've never seen before. The elderly enhancements are remarkable. Will he recover? The general asked. I believe so, but it will take time. Takeda nodded, looking down at the young man who had potentially saved humanity from extinction. Make sure he gets whatever he needs. Earth owes him a debt we can never fully repay. 3 days passed with the Vraxian fleet maintaining its position in lunar orbit. Earth's defensive systems remained on high alert, but the promised consultation period appeared to be genuine. Global leaders, informed of the extraordinary events at the Rocky Mountain complex, began cautious preparations for a future where humanity might once again look to the stars without Vraxian interference. On the 4th day, Orin finally regained full consciousness. He found Dr. Reese checking his vital signs, her expression brightening when she noticed he was awake. Welcome back, she said warmly. You had us worried. Orin attempted to sit up, finding his body surprisingly responsive despite the ordeal it had endured. The Vraxians, what happened? They've withdrawn to lunar orbit, Dr. Reese explained. No hostile actions since your demonstration. General Takeda is eager to speak with you as soon as you're able. Orin nodded, processing this information. He could sense the dimensional fabric around Earth had stabilized, no longer roiling with the energy signatures of weapons fire and invasion preparations. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was a respite humanity hadn't experienced in generations. General Takeda arrived shortly after receiving word of Orin's recovery. Your gamble paid off, he said without preamble. The Vraxian fleet remains in consultation mode. Their admiral, Zaret, has communicated several times, asking questions about the elderly knowledge you shared. And Earth's defenses? Orin asked. Fully operational and significantly improved, thanks to your modifications. If the Vraxians decide to resume hostilities, we're in a much stronger position than before. Orin nodded, satisfied. And Haven? Elena? Both safe, Takeda confirmed. Commander Vance has been in regular contact. They suffered minimal casualties during the Vraxian attack, thanks to your intervention. Relief washed over Orin. The settlement that had first welcomed him to Earth, however cautiously, had survived. There's something else you should know, Takeda continued, his expression growing more serious. Yesterday, a small Vraxian vessel approached Earth under diplomatic protocols. It carried a single passenger who requested asylum and direct communication with you. Orin's brow furrowed in confusion. A Vraxian defector? Not exactly, Takeda replied. He claims to be a seeker of truth, apparently a kind of scholarly caste within Vraxian society. He says the knowledge you shared has caused significant division among their leadership. The Prophet's authority is being questioned for the first time in centuries. This was unexpected but promising. The Vraxians weren't a monolithic entity. Like any advanced species, they contained diversity of thought and belief. If doubt had been introduced into their religious hierarchy, I'd like to meet this seeker, Orin decided. The meeting took place in a secure conference room within the Rocky Mountain complex. The Vraxian seeker, introduced as Vexel, was physically imposing like all his species. Nearly 2 meters tall, with the characteristic exoskeleton and compound eyes. But his manner was distinctly non-aggressive, his posture conveying what Orin recognized as scholarly deference. The bearer of elderly wisdom, Vexel greeted him, mandibles clicking softly in what passed for respectful tones in Vraxian communication. Your revelation has shaken the foundations of our society. That was the intention, Orin replied honestly. For 1,000 years, the prophecy of ascension has guided our expansion, Vexel continued. The genetic harvest of compatible species was considered our sacred duty, the path to transcendence. Now, many question whether we have misinterpreted our destiny entirely. And what do you believe, Seeker Vexel? The Vraxian's compound eyes shifted, focusing and refocusing, a sign of deep consideration. I believe the Eldery would not have preserved their knowledge if they intended lesser species to remain ignorant forever. The Guardian Cavarax chose you, a human, as the recipient of this wisdom. This suggests the Eldery saw in humanity what they once saw in themselves. Orin nodded, impressed by the Seeker's insight. Cavarax believed that humanity would achieve in thousands of years what took other species millions. Not because humans are inherently superior, but because of their adaptability and capacity for innovation. Qualities the Vraxians once possessed before the Prophet's doctrine calcified our development, Vexel observed. We became focused on harvesting the potential of others rather than nurturing our own. The conversation continued for hours, Vexel asking increasingly detailed questions about the elderly knowledge Orin carried. What emerged was a picture of a Vraxian society in the midst of a profound ideological crisis, one that could lead either to reform or to a desperate doubling down on their conquest of Earth. The fleet remains divided, Vexel explained. Admiral Zaret leads those who accept the truth of your revelation. The Prophet's most devoted followers, however, call for immediate resumption of the attack, claiming your display was fabricated deception. And which faction is stronger? Orin asked. Currently balanced, which is why the consultation continues. But the Prophet has ruled for centuries. His influence runs deep. Orin considered this information carefully. Earth's improved defenses might withstand a renewed Vraxian assault, but at tremendous cost to both sides. What was needed was a more definitive demonstration, something that would convince even the Prophet's staunchest supporters. There is another option, Orin said finally. One that would prove beyond doubt that the Eldery path is not what the Prophet has claimed. Vexel's attention sharpened. What do you propose? A journey, Orin replied. To the dimensional boundary the Eldery crossed. Not a full crossing. That would require technology beyond what either humans or Vraxians currently possess, but near enough to detect the Eldery civilization continuing on the other side. Such a journey would be extremely dangerous, Vexel noted. The dimensional boundaries are inherently unstable. Yes, Orin agreed, but I possess the knowledge to navigate them safely, or at least as safely as possible. And if successful, it would provide irrefutable evidence of the Eldery's true path. The proposal was radical, but its potential to end the conflict permanently made it worth the risk. After consulting with General Takeda and Earth's leadership, a joint mission was planned. A single ship carrying Orin, Vexel, and representatives from both Earth and the Vraxian factions. Dr. Reese insisted on joining the expedition as Earth's scientific representative. Someone needs to document this properly, she argued when Orin expressed concern for her safety. Besides, I've been studying your physiological adaptations since you arrived. If something goes wrong, I might be able to help. Admiral Zaret himself volunteered to represent the Vraxian military, bringing along a senior acolyte of the Prophet to witness whatever they discovered. The vessel selected for the mission was the Night Wing, extensively modified with Orin's guidance to withstand the stresses of approaching a dimensional boundary. Elena, having returned from Haven with reports of the settlement's recovery, insisted on piloting. You saved my home, she told Orin simply. I'm seeing this through to the end. The departure took place 7 days after the Vraxian fleet's withdrawal to lunar orbit. The Prophet, still sequestered aboard his flagship, had grudgingly approved the mission, likely hoping it would fail and vindicate his teachings. As the Night Wing ascended from Earth, Orin stood at the viewport, watching his species' homeworld recede below them. So much had changed since his return from the sanctuary. He had found a place among his own kind, despite his differences. He had helped turn the tide against extinction. Yet he still felt Cavarax's absence keenly, the dragon who had been parent, teacher, and guardian to him for 20 years. You would be proud, he murmured to the stars. Knowledge preserved and shared, just as the Eldery intended. The journey to the dimensional boundary took 3 days, following coordinates Orin extracted from his integrated Eldery knowledge. The location was far beyond the orbit of Pluto, in a region of space where the fabric of reality was naturally thinner, a place the Eldery had specifically chosen for their departure from this universe. As they approached, Orin's enhanced senses detected the boundary before any instruments could, a subtle distortion in space-time, invisible to normal perception but radiant to his Eldery-enhanced vision. There, he indicated, guiding Elena's piloting. Reduce speed and hold position 5,000 kilometers from the boundary. The Nightwing slowed, coming to a relative stop at the designated distance. Through the viewport, there was nothing visually unusual to see, just the eternal darkness of deep space, punctuated by distant stars. I detect no anomalies, the prophet's acolyte stated dismissively, his mandibles clicking with disdain. This proves nothing. Your instruments are not calibrated to detect dimensional boundaries, Orin explained patiently. But they can be modified. He turned to Dr. Reese. The adjustments we discussed? She nodded, activating a series of modifications to the Nightwing sensor array. Changes based on Orin's knowledge that would allow the ship to perceive what normally existed beyond human and Vraxian detection capabilities. The main display flickered, then stabilized, showing something extraordinary. A shimmering curtain of energy stretching across space, rippling with patterns that seemed to follow mathematical sequences too complex for immediate comprehension. The dimensional boundary, Orin announced. The threshold the Eldery crossed. Even the prophet's acolyte fell silent, compound eyes fixed on the display in undisguised wonder. Admiral Zaret moved closer to the screen, mandibles working in agitation. Can you detect anything beyond? He asked. Orin nodded. With one final modification, he approached the sensor controls, channeling a small portion of his own Eldery energy into the system. The display shifted again, the perspective seeming to penetrate the boundary itself, revealing glimpses of what lay beyond, structures of impossible geometry, energy patterns that suggested advanced civilization, and, most crucially, biological signatures. The Eldery, Orin confirmed. Still physical beings, still evolving. Just in a reality operating under different physical laws than our own. The evidence was undeniable, visible to all present. The prophet's acolyte backed away from the display, mandibles clicking rapidly in what Vexel later explained was the Vraxian equivalent of religious shock. They did not ascend to energy form, Admiral Zaret stated, his voice subdued. They simply moved elsewhere. A journey, not a transformation, Orin agreed. The difference is crucial. The implications were profound. The entire basis of the Vraxian prophecy of ascension, the belief that conquering and assimilating other species would lead to evolution into pure energy, was demonstrably false. The Eldery had never followed such a path, and the Vraxians' millennia-long campaign of conquest had been founded on a fundamental misunderstanding. We must return immediately, the acolyte declared, his earlier dismissiveness replaced with urgency. The prophet must be shown this truth. The return journey was conducted in contemplative silence, each participant processing the implications of what they had witnessed. For the Vraxians, it represented a civilization-altering revelation. For humanity, it offered hope of a future free from the threat of extinction. As they approached Earth, Admiral Zaret received a transmission from the Vraxian fleet, one that caused his compound eyes to widen in surprise. The prophet has called for a conclave of all castes, he announced. The first in 700 years. News of our discovery has already reached the fleet through Vexel's transmissions. What does a conclave mean for Earth? General Takeda asked via communicator from the Rocky Mountain complex. It means change, Zaret replied. The prophet's authority is being formally questioned. Whether he retains leadership will depend on how the conclave interprets what we have discovered. The Nightwing landed at the Rocky Mountain complex to a hero's welcome. Word of the mission's success had spread throughout Earth's defense network, igniting cautious optimism that the Vraxian threat might truly be ending. In the days that followed, the Vraxian fleet began to disperse, many ships departing the Sol system entirely as they were called to attend the conclave in the Vraxian home system. Admiral Zaret, before departing himself, established a formal communication channel with Earth's leadership, the first step toward what might eventually become diplomatic relations rather than conquest. Our path forward is uncertain, he admitted to Orin during their final meeting. 1,000 years of purpose cannot be abandoned in a moment. But the truth you have shown us cannot be denied either. The Vraxian people must find a new destiny, one based on our own development rather than the harvesting of others. For Orin, the transition to life on Earth continued to present challenges. His enhanced abilities and unique perspective made him an outsider among his own species, yet his contributions had earned him respect and acceptance. Earth Defense Command created a special division under his leadership, focused on adapting Eldari knowledge to strengthen humanity's position in the galaxy. 1 year after the Vraxian withdrawal, Orin stood on a hillside overlooking the rebuilt and expanded Haven settlement. Elena, now a close friend and occasional romantic interest, stood beside him. "Thinking about Cavarax?" she asked, noting his contemplative expression. Orin nodded. "He's sacrificed everything to give me this chance, to give humanity this chance. I still wonder if I've done enough to honor that sacrifice." "You saved Earth from extinction," Elena pointed out. "I'd say that's a pretty good start." Orin smiled faintly. "It's just a start, though. The knowledge I carry, it isn't meant just to defend humanity, but to help it grow, to find its own path to the kind of understanding the Eldari achieved." "One step at a time," Elena advised. "Humanity nearly didn't survive the Vraxians. We need time to recover, to rebuild, before we tackle dimensional physics and transcendent evolution." She was right, of course. The legacy Cavarax had entrusted to him wasn't meant to be rushed. The Eldari themselves had taken millions of years to develop the understanding that led them to cross the dimensional boundary. Humanity would follow its own path, at its own pace. In the distance, construction crews worked on a new structure at the center of Haven, a memorial and research center dedicated to Cavarax and the knowledge he had preserved. The building's design incorporated crystalline elements reminiscent of the dragon's scales, glimmering blue-purple in the afternoon sun. "You know what Cavarax would say if he could see you now?" Elena asked. Orin raised an eyebrow questioningly. "He'd say you're an unexpected variable that changed everything," she said with a smile, referencing the meaning of the name the dragon had given him. Orin laughed, a sound that had become more frequent as he adjusted to life among humans. He would at that. As they walked back toward the settlement, Orin felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced since leaving the sanctuary. Earth was not the home he had grown up in, but it was where he belonged, among his own kind, helping them navigate a future now filled with possibilities rather than extinction. The dragon had discovered a human baby beneath the battlefield and vanished with him. But in returning that child, transformed by knowledge and experience, Cavarax had given humanity its greatest gift, a future among the stars. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.